Evening, everybody. How are we doing? How's the volume today? How's everyone doing this evening? Okay, so we want to talk about SQL in Node. Or rather, how we can connect it to the HTML. Okay, yep. We have talked about that a couple previous times, but we can certainly go over it again. That's not an issue. I think we did an example of it with a login system, but we can maybe look at coming up with something else. What else are people thinking? Yeah, no worries. I know the latency is a little bit off, but it's better than it has been in a couple weeks ago. Well, the first stream at least is better than it was in the first stream, so we'll see how we go with that. Okay, well, while it's just the few of us, we'll get started on taking a look at this, and if anyone else has anything that they want to ask questions about or request that we discuss, we can certainly go ahead and add that in there if need be. So I'll just Right, okay. Alright, so how do we connect SQL database to HTML page and edit values in the database? Okay, that's a good one. So, let's see. Let's see if I can pull up. Oh, okay, we'll do something from scratch. Okay, so let's say we've got, we'll go to the sort of the classic blog post example or blog page example that we've sort of been taking a look at here and there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up a new Express server. Okay, so got my Alright, so we've got a new folder to set up an Express server here, which we're going to go ahead and do. Okay, there's our Express server and the basic bits and pieces for that Express server. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a page in my public folder. It's going to be an index.html page. Actually, let's maybe come back to that. We'll start at the server side and then we'll work our way back over to the client. So let's have a quick think about sort of what kind of data that we want to have in our database. So in this case, we're storing some blog posts or something like that. Again, I'm just going with your basic blog post example here. So once we have an idea about roughly what data we want to store and how we want to store it, so I guess the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to come up with a basic schema. So for argument's sake, we'll just have one table in the database, and that table is going to be our blog post database. So we'll go ahead and set up a database. Now I'm going to go ahead and set up a new database, a new MySQL instance for myself here. But if you've installed MySQL the way that you normally would on if you've installed it the way you normally would according to the instructions for your home computer, this step you can skip and just go ahead and connect directly to the database engine that you have set up. I don't have a database engine running on my computer at the moment. I can spawn one whenever I need to using the script that I have here. But this script may not work on your own computer, so don't worry about that. Okay, so now I've got a SQL Server up and running. Again, you probably already have your own SQL Server up and running, so you don't have to worry about that. And I realize now that you probably can't see the commands that I'm typing there. So let me go ahead and swip my view around there. All right. So I've got my SQL Server up and running. And I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit larger. All right. Switch profiles, teaching, there we go. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and, in fact, I'm pretty sure I have a thing for this. All right, there we go. All right, so I'm into my database. Let's go ahead and just create a really basic table that we can use to store some blog posts. So maybe what kind of information do we want to have in our blog post table? What kind of fields do we want to have? So for anyone who's just joined in while we're talking about that, the request was that we want to know how can we connect a SQL database to a HTML and edit the values in the database. So I figured that we just go through and do a quick example of that from scratch. It's worth noting that you do it I probably should have said this at the start, you do it the exact same way that you query the database to get any information out of the database. Because inserting information into the database is the same as querying it to get it out. It's just that you use an insert statement rather than a select statement. So yeah, we'll just go through this example, see how we go. If anyone has anything else that they'd like us to cover, I'll keep saying this throughout, but if you've got anything that you want us to go over, whack it over in the chat on the right there, and we can take a look at that. Otherwise, we'll just keep working through this example, but we could certainly have a play with a few different bits and pieces if need be. We could look at some security stuff or other bits and pieces if people want to. It's whatever anyone wants to, and if you have any questions at any time, just ask them in the chat down there. So, all right, where were we? So we were going to go ahead and create a new database for this thing, and so let's go ahead and do that now. So create database. What do we want our database to be called? WDC, all right, we'll call it WDC. All right, and we will go ahead and use that database. All right, so now we're in the WDC database. We're going to create a table called blog posts or something like that. We'll just blog post, that seems good. And we need to go ahead and describe what that table is going to look like. So what are the things that we're going to need in that table? Well, we're probably going to have a primary key, and that's going to be the ID of an individual post. So I'm going to have post ID, which we can make an int for the moment. And if we want, we can make it auto increment as well. Why not? Auto increment. There's meant to be an underscore in there, isn't it, in MySQL? All right, so that's that. All right, and what else are we going to need? Well, we're probably going to need the title. So title, which can be some arbitrary length string. Let's maybe make it a nice long one. I'm going to make it 250 characters for the title. And what else are we going to need in there? We're going to need the post content, which is going to be text, and probably also the post date. So date, which is going to be of a type date. In fact, maybe let's not call it date. Let's call it created time. It's going to call it created time, and we're going to make that a date data type, I believe. Rather date, like that. Anything else we want in that table? I'm just going to quickly go ahead and adjust the lighting in here. I'll be right back. Alright, sorry about that. The lights like to turn themselves off at semi-regular intervals. So, where do we get to? No additional suggestions in there at the moment. Okay, alright, so we'll start with that. So each blog post is going to have a title, some text, and a date. And I may have gotten my types a little bit off here, but we'll see how we go. Incorrect table definition, there can only be one auto column and it must be defined as a key. Alright, I forgot to add the primary key. And that one's going to be post ID. Alright. Cool. Alright, so we've got a new table in here. It's going to be our table for storing our blog posts. So we've got our WDC database. It's got a table called blog post. Looks like that at the moment. Alright. So the question is, how do we add new blog posts to this table? How do we retrieve existing blog posts from this table? And it's fairly straightforward, so let's go ahead and create a route to do this for us. So I'm going to hop into my index.js file, but you could use a users.js file if you wanted to. Alright. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a post request route, just for argument's sake. What else am I going to need? We're going to need to set up the database in our app.js. So let's go ahead and open that up as well. We're going to have to set up our database middleware as well. So I'm going to pull up a previous example of doing that, which I think we did a couple weeks ago. So I'm going to just quickly take a look. Oop, not with that one. Okay, so here's our previous app.js where we actually loaded in SQL. And we had sessions in that one. Let's not worry about sessions and authentication just for the moment, though we can possibly add it in later on if need be. All right, so we set up our set of available connections here. We specify the blog post as, wait, no, we called it WDC was our database, wasn't it? So WDC is our database, and that's a connection on our local machine that we're connecting to. Theoretically, you could have your database server running on a different machine somewhere else if you really wanted to, which is just fine. And a lot of large sites would do that. They'd have their database distributed across a large cluster of different hosts and have a connection pool consisting of a number of different connections. Okay, so we've imported the library, we set up the connection pool, then we're going to need our middleware, which I'm going to take. And it's very important that we put the middleware just here. Not specifically right here, but it needs to go below this line here where app gets created, but above these lines here where we declare our index router and our users router. The reason why it's important that it goes above there is because we are creating a variable on our request objects called pool. That variable is not going to exist for requests going through the index.js and the users.js if it gets created after we call the index.js and users.js, which happens just here. So we want to make sure that that is available at the point that the request goes through these two, which is why it's important that it goes there. All right. Okay, so we set that up. That's our app.js. That's pretty much all we have to do there. So we were creating a post request. Let's call this one add post or something like this. Yeah, sure, why not? We'll call this add post. And assuming the post comes in as some JSON, then we can pull the information from the post out of the request body, which is what we'll have there. So we'll come back to that in a second. All right, so what's the next thing that we're going to do? We're going to have to load up the data into the database. What's that going to look like? Again, I'm going to pull up my handy example from last time, which is here. So this is our standard old databasey stuff here, but we'll take a quick look at what's going on in there in just a sec. All right, so okay, so what have we got here? So we've got req.pool.getConnection. So req.pool is the thing that we set up in our app.js middleware. GetConnection grabs us the database connection. That's all well and good. If there's an error with that, we're sending a 402 to say, hey, that's a bad request. Then we've got our query just here. And this is where all the magic happens regardless. Then we've got the part where we actually run the query on the database, and then finally, this is the part down here where we react. In fact, I'm just going to shrink this over a little bit so that we have a bit more space. Okay, so then we've got the part over here, which is how do we react to the query when it comes back, if it comes back. So that all seems good. That all seems good. Yeah, let's take a look at this query and see what we've got here. So at the moment, it's a select query from the previous one, but we want to write our own query, and that's going to be the one that's going to create the blog post and add it into the database. So what are we going to have to, what's an example of a query that we could use to put some data into the database. So it's going to be starting with an insert statement, insert into blog post, and okay, it's going to look something like that. In fact, I don't think we need the semicolon at the end for this one because it's just a single query. So insert into blog post something, values something. So something is the columns. We don't need to specify the, so if we hop back over here for a second, we don't need to specify the post ID because it's auto incremented. So it's going to be title, comma, content, comma, created, underscore time. All right, so that's all good. Values, and what are the values that we're going to have? So title is going to be, values are going to be question mark, comma, and this one we might actually do something a little bit sneaky, and I'm going to go ahead and grab the current date using the MySQL function for grabbing the current date. So I believe it's just now, but we'll check real quickly. MySQL now. So I believe it's going to be something like that, where now is a function that grabs the current date. And if we wanted to check that, we could just Google it real quickly, and you can see it comes back like this. And it gives us a nice little example of it as well on W3 Schools. Alright, so it gives you this nice little date string just there. So we can use that to set the current date and time of the blog post, which we're going to do. All right, so now it's going to go straight into the database, in which case it's just the title and the content that we're going to send in. It's going to be req.body.title is what we're going to call it, just for argument's sake. Ideally, in your data plan, you've roughly figured out what your variables and things are going to be called. Okay, so req.body.title, req.body.content. So we run that in our query. In theory, that's all that needs to happen. The query doesn't return any rows back. So we can take a look and we can just do something like, now I can't remember exactly what the deal is with this is, but I'm pretty sure the error object will be null if there are any problems. So if there's an error, again, we can send a 402. Otherwise, let's go ahead and send, in fact, we should return after this point here. I've just realized. Otherwise, we can go ahead and send a 200. Okay, and that's pretty much all that our post request is going to be for this one here. So now that we've got our post request that's going to add some data to the database, let's start up our server and give it a crack. First thing that I'm going to need to do, of course, is I'm going to need to, before I actually start the server, I'm going to need to install all our libraries, which will happen in just a second. Right, and also going to need to install the library for MySQL, which I don't think is in there by default. Going to go ahead and install that, and then we can start that up. And we haven't even written any client code yet, but we can just straight up go ahead and test this one out using Insomnia. So we're going to go ahead and use Insomnia to do that for us. All right, so I've got a number of post requests down the left side here. Going to create a new post request. We'll call this add blog post. And it's going to have a JSON body. There we go. All right, so we're creating a post request. It's going to be to localhost, which is our usual, and it's going to be, what did we call this route? Was it just add post? It was add post. All right, so we create a post request to add post. That's all well and straightforward. And we know that the request body is going to contain some JSON, and that the JSON is going to contain a title and a content value. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, and then it's also going to, each of those is going to contain some amount of stuff. All right, so let's take a look at that. So the title value is going to be, I don't know, my first post. And the content value is going to be, this is my first blog post. So again, we haven't even written any client code, but we're able to just straight up test this out and make sure it's all working by, we've created a rough route for it, and then we can go ahead, test it in Insomnia. Once we've got that all working, we can go ahead and write our client code. All right, so my first post, this is my first blog post. There we go. And we can go ahead and let's just give that a run and see what happens. So I send that to my server. Hey, I get a 200 back. Well, that was all right. I didn't print out anything as that was happening onto my command line, but let's take a look and see in my database what's happened there. So let's go ahead and select all from, and the caps doesn't matter, but I like to be pedantic about it. Select all from blog post. And there is our blog post just there. And I realize in hindsight that it's only storing the date, not the actual full date and time. So I'm going to need to modify my table, I think. So alter table blog post set, I believe it is created time. And I'm going to check my alter table syntax because I don't do this very often, as you can tell. Okay, so it was modify, not set, so there's that. Okay, it's just modify column name, data type. So I believe we want date, time. Okay. Let's go ahead and send that blog post again and see what we can get this time. And we should end up with 2 blog posts in there. Hey, this second blog post now has the full date and time stamp on there, which is nice. So, what have we done? We've gone ahead, we've added some data to our database using an insert statement as part of our post request. So at this point we could go ahead, we could write our client code, code that would create an AJAX request, pull the data out of some text boxes or text areas on the page, format it into some AJAX, send that AJAX off in a post request to the server, and that would have the same effect as what we've been doing in Insomnia here, manually creating the request. And then presumably we'd also have some kind of method back on the client side, or sorry, some kind of method to retrieve blog posts back, maybe one that would grab all of the blog posts out of the database and display them on the page. So we've got lots of options to go from there. I'm going to take a quick pause at this point here. I'm going to leave this code on the screen. What are people thinking? Do we want to keep going any further, or where do we want to go from here? Do we have somewhere else that we want to, do we want to take a look at what the client code is? Do we want to look at something completely different now? What are people thinking? we look at the client code if people don't have any other questions? Yes, absolutely. We'll just give other people a quick moment to absorb what we've been going on. Do you have any other questions about like the server code or what we've been doing? Does that all make sense? How did I set up the SQL folder within the Express folders? Yes, so the SQL folder within the Express folders, that's a specific to my computer kind of setup that we're looking at there. So on your end, you have the database on your own computer. And the database engine, you know, in theory, if you've got it set up following the guide, when you turn on your computer, it should start up the SQL server, and that's when you would normally open up your MySQL client software, or if you're running on a Linux system, you'd just be able to run the MySQL client straight off the bat. So normally you still may go through an extra step, which is to create a blank server on my machine, and that's just because of the way I have my machine set up. But in your case, you'll have one main server running in the background, which is the one that you would be creating databases and tables on, and using those databases and tables from your configurations. Alternately, if you're using the lab machines, the method that I just did, which created a folder in my WDC folder, or within my Express folders, would probably be the same thing as what you do. You don't have to include that folder at all, though. That's just an artifact of the way that I have my system set up. So if you wanted to export this database or something like that, or have it so that the database could be accessed by your other team members, the way that you'd go about doing that would be to dump the database using the MySQL dump, and then take the SQL file and share that around amongst your team members, and then they'd be able to load that SQL file into their respective database systems and pick up where we left off. Yeah. In hindsight, I probably shouldn't have put that folder in there. I realized that's a little bit confusing. Yeah, absolutely, Callum. It's a bit of a deep queue at the moment, but yeah, I can certainly take a look at that straight after the live stream. That's all right. All right, well, we'll go ahead and then take a look at some client code for this. So just for, oh, yep, I'm having trouble accessing the database to show results searched from the input tag search bar in HTML. Can we please go over how we go about showing database content in the HTML page after going through the client-side code? Yeah, okay, all right, let's go ahead and do that then. So accessing the database to show results searched for, okay, well, if we want to display the results back, we're going to need a GET request of some sort to do that. So let's go ahead and create a GET request. It could be a POST request if it was to be done in conjunction with sending data to the database, but let's go ahead and make it a GET request. So this one's going to be GET all posts. Why not? So we're going to create a GET request for GET all posts. And this one's going to be a pretty straightforward request. In fact, it doesn't need a request body at all, because we're just going to grab all of the blog posts and spit them out in our data. So let's go ahead and look at that. So we're going to select all from blog post. So remember, our blog post has a post ID, title, content, and created time. None of this is sensitive data, so I don't have any issues sending all of this data back to my client side, but maybe I might want to obscure the structure from what it would be in the database a little bit. So we could make it something like select post underscore ID as ID, title, we could probably just leave title named the same thing, content as body, and created time as timestamp. So we're just sort of renaming all the columns so that it comes back a little bit nicer from our query. Okay, so select all of that from blog post, and we just want all of them. So we don't even need to have a where or anything like that in there. So that's going to be our query there. Obviously, we're not putting any new information into the query, so we don't need to have this optional array of the prepared statements that we're going to have. So, same deal as before, and what we can do is we can res.json, and this is where I forget exactly what it is, but I believe it's just going to be rows. Res.json rows. Yeah, that looks good. And that's going to get us all the rows returned by that query. So in this case, let's just console log our row. Well, you know what, let's not even bother with console logging it. We could if we wanted to, but I think this should just work. So let's see what we can do. Now I'm going to hop over to Insomnia again, and I'm going to create this get request. So, okay, I'm going to call this all posts. There we go. So we're going to grab all of our blog posts, going to make it a get request. Of course, that means that it's not going to have a body. So even though it gives us the option of putting the body here, we shouldn't have a body on a get request. And this one's going to be get all posts. Now, if I go ahead and send that to the server, let's take a look at what comes back. And you can see that it's made the query to the database, and it's spat out this beautiful object, which is a very nice JSON of all of the rows in the database, which is just those first 2 rows in the database. So if we wanted to add another blog post, maybe we'll make this my blog post number 3 or something like this. Content, another. Like that, send another blog post to the server, and now if we do our get all blog posts again, hey, cool, so we're getting our blog post back. So now that we have all of, now that we have a route to send new blog posts to the server, we have a route to retrieve that information back to the client. So let's go ahead and write our client code. So I'm going to create a new HTML file here. Still annoyed that the doc type declaration doesn't come in a default HTML file on this system, but that's okay. All right, title, it's a blog, all right. All right, so going ahead and creating just a basic blog page here. Let's have, say, a text area where we write our blog posts. Actually, first we might have a title box to put the title in. So input type equals text. And then Size. Oh no, okay, that's okay. Type equals text. Let's give it an ID for argument's sake. That's probably a terrible idea. What am I thinking? Okay, let's call this blog post title. Okay, so the ID is blog post title. There we go. And then we're going to have a text area. Should probably give it an ID as well. Let's just make it easier to select later on. ID equals blog post body. There we go. That's all nice. And then finally, we're going to have a button. It's going to be add post. All right, so we create a new button. And it doesn't really need an ID because it's just going to trigger some code. We'll come back to that in a second. And then maybe we're going to have a horizontal rule on the page. And then let's go with a div where we can have our blog posts rendered. Now, going to take a quick poll. Do we want to use a view or do we want to just use regular vanilla JavaScript for this? Okay. I'll just give it a second in case anyone else wants to chip in, but we're happy to keep going with plain old JavaScript here. In which case I'll give this div an ID. Now for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to do this inline, but I would usually encourage everybody to do this in a separate file, or at the very least write it inline to start with, and then go ahead and put it in a separate file later. Is it possible to look at both? Alright, we'll start with plain JavaScript, then we'll convert to Vue. Right, okay, so we've got a script here, that's all well and good, so this is going to be where... just space this out a little bit. Okay, so that's where we write a new blog post. This is where blog posts show up on the page, for instance. Now we could add a button here. In fact, I might just add a button here. That's not it. So I'm adding a button for showing blog posts, but you might want to have that happen automatically or something when a page loads. I'll leave that up to you. We'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, so what are we going to need? We're going to have two functions. We're going to have a function for adding a blog post. And we're going to have a function for retrieving the blog posts and putting them on the page. Okay, now for this we're going to need to make use of some Ajax, or at least the way that we like to do it in this course is making use of Ajax. So I'm going to quickly look up my Ajax code because I can never remember exactly what it is, but let's take a look. XML. Oh, how convenient. It's in my frequently visited pages. So when that loads up, Alright, so an XML HTTP, so there's our standard AJAX request and what that looks like. I'm just going to pull that down. All right, so adding a post is going to create an AJAX request that does all the usual stuff. Going to do all the usual stuff, and similarly we're going to have another AJAX request for retrieving posts. Let's start with the one that actually sends the posts. So we are going to do a post request, and it's going to be to match the route that we set up in here, which is add post. Right, so it's a post request to that. Now we want to make sure that we are sending as JSON, so we're going to need to explicitly tell the server that we're sending JSON. So it's going to be where is it? Come on, come on. Guys, give me a link to your API, please. I can never remember exactly. Here it is. The exact syntax for the set request header, or at least the exact capitalization, but evidently it's just called set request header. So we're going to go ahead and use that. Set request header, and what is the request header going to look like? It's going to match the convenient request header that we have in here. So we're going to set the content type header, content type to JSON, which looks like this. That's going to tell our web server that it's JSON that's coming in. So we set the request header, we're going to send, what are we going to send? We are going to send off some stuff. How are we going to respond to that stuff when it comes back? Let's go ahead. We probably don't need to do anything if it comes back successful, but maybe if it comes back unsuccessful, let's go with greater than or equal to 400, so there's an error of some sort. Then we could do something like pop up an alert box saying, hey, we were unsuccessful. All right, so we're gonna do something if the blog post wasn't able to be added, but otherwise we want to actually send the blog post off. So what are we gonna send? We're gonna need the contents of this input here, which is gonna be the title. So what are we gonna send? We're gonna send a JSON object, and the JSON object, if we remember correctly, looks like title, and then a title of some sort, which is going to be the content of blog post title. And then it's going to be, I think we had content, or was it body? Can't remember. What did it look like here? Content. It would probably be better if I was more consistent, but it's going to look something like, wow, where did that go? Right, so that's roughly what we want. Of course, we want this to be the actual blog post title. So how do we get the value of the blog post input? With a document.get element by ID. Document.get element by ID. Whoop. Blog post title dot value, and all right, so that's going to grab the title and the body, and it's going to send them across in our JSON object. We want to put that in our send statement, but first of all, we want to actually convert it to proper JSON. So stringify. Oh my gosh, come on. And that's pretty much it. So what that's going to do is that's going to take this object just here, which contains a title, which is whatever is written into this input box here, and some content, which is whatever is written into this text area just here, and it's going to send that up to the server. And if there's an error coming back for whatever reason, we will get an alert box popping up. Otherwise, we don't really need to do anything. We just, the blog post has been submitted. We could, if we wanted to, we could prompt like submitted, or in fact, you know what, let's go ahead and do that. Let's make a success 1 if 200. Okay, all right, so it's going to pop up and say posted if it was successful adding the blog post. Otherwise, it's going to pop up with an error message saying, please try again, essentially. This is where we actually send the post off. So we create the new request. We tell it what to do when a response comes in. That doesn't happen just yet. We open up a new connection. We set the header of the connection for it to be JSON so that we know it's JSON. We then send the request off with this content as some JSON. And then once the response comes back, we do one of these things depending on the response. So that's going to be our add post code. Let's take a look at our get posts code. What do we want to do with our get posts code? We want to populate this div here with some blog posts. So I guess first thing we want to do is we want to figure out what is the blog post going to look like. So in this case, what I might do is I might say, okay, well, let's figure out what a blog post is going to look like. So I'm going to have maybe a div to start with. And then in that div, I might have, let's see, a level 3 heading. Sure, why not? A level 3 heading that contains the title. And then a small paragraph underneath, who's going to contain the date, and then another paragraph that's going to contain, let's make it a span. Let's make this a span. Don't forget our closing tag properly. So this is going to be title, date. In fact, you know what? I'm going to float this one to the right. So I'm going to start with the date. Style equals float. All right, there we go. All right, cool. Okay, so we've got a span. It's going to be floated to the right. It's going to have the date, and then this is going to be content just here, and that's going to be in a nice little div. And maybe we can go ahead and set the, you know what? Let's set some styles. Why not? So just for argument's sake, let's just add a quick dot blog post. I'm going to put a border on this, so border top 1 pixel solid gray. Sure, that works. Yeah, in fact, we could just go with a top border. Why not? Let's go with a top border for each of them. Okay, so each of them is going to have just a little border along the top of the blog post. That's going to actually, let's make it the bottom. Why not? Nah, back to the top. Can't decide. Having fun. All right. Question that's popped up at some point in the last few minutes. We create a new div through JavaScript with each new post request. Not with each new post request. So sorry, I'm shifting on to the get request at the moment. So before we actually create the get request, which is going to grab all of our blog posts back, we want to figure out what each blog post is going to look like. So we're not creating the new div with the post request. We're going to create it when we actually receive the blog post back with the get requests. Okay, so blog post. So that's going to create the actual div itself, and then I'm going to say blog post span floats right. That way we don't have to bother with this. So we can do class is going to equal blog post. There we go. All right, and maybe we could also make like the color of this gray as well, or something like that. Yeah, that works. Neato. All right, so this is roughly what one of our blog posts is going to look like. Let's take that out of there because we don't need it there right now. We want to get it into this here get request. So we're going to send a get request. The get request is going to be for get all posts. Okay, so we send a get request to get all posts, and if it comes back successfully, then we want to use that information to populate this here. What's going to come back? It's going to come back something like one of these. So this is the information that's going to come back. It's going to come back as some nice JSON. So we can pull all of that information out of the JSON that comes back and use that to construct our blog post. Let's take a look at what that looks like. So we know what a blog post looks like. So what can we do? We can, first of all, we can grab all of the actual content. So we're going to have var equals json.stringify this dot response text. All right, so it's going to take the response data and it's going to convert it from a JSON string back into an object. That's going to be useful for us. So we've got a JSON string, it gets converted into an object. Now we can just use this like a regular old array. So I can use a for loop of some sort, or I can use my array.each function. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do bposts.each. Is it each or for each? Can't remember. Let's take a quick look. It's for each. Okay. So we're creating a function that runs for each of the items in the array, which will create this nice little div here. We'll get to making that look proper in just a second. So, okay, so we have our array of blog posts. Let's first all out just empty out this posts array here. So element by ID. Okay, so we grow our post element, there we go, and p dot. Alright, so, and then we just wipe it empty to start with. So we emptied this out, that's all good. And then we're going to go through and we're going to create a new blog post for every blog post that appears in this array of blog posts here. So what we're going to have is we're going to have, and this is probably the quickest and nastiest way of doing it, but it's up to you how you go about doing it. So pdiv.inner HTML plus equals, so we're taking the inner HTML and we're going to go ahead and construct this new HTML on the page. So there's our div just there. All right. Right, so that will add a new blog post that looks exactly like this to the page, but we want to get the date and all of the other bits and pieces into there. So let's get them out of this JSON data here. Now, if we were taking a bit more time with this, we might do a little bit of work to make sure that the actual blog posts that are going up to the server can't contain regular old HTML in them, and then the values that we're dumping back into here are going to be not straight HTML, in which case we would be constructing the whole bit element by element, and that's actually quite easy to do in Vue. It's a little bit more work to do in regular old JavaScript. So we'll do the quick and easy way in regular JavaScript, and then we can take a look at doing it the quick and easy and better way in Vue. So, all right, so what have we got here? So this is going to need to be, oh, actually, hang on, I should check my for each. So we do need to get the specific elements out of the array, and it feels like loading. Firefox gets a little bit iffy when we, here we go, so elements. So the first item in the function inside a for each loop represents each item that appears in the array. So we're going to go ahead and use those. Okay, so function elements, so it's going to be element dot, and it's going to be dot ID, dot title, dot body, and dot timestamp. So the date's going to have dot timestamp. There we go. Now if I want, I could convert this to a date ahead of time. Title, body. Okay, that's going to take those three things, it's going to construct it into one of these nice divs. In fact, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and put some end line characters in there just for good measure so that it all stacks out nicely, which means everything's going to be nicely spaced when it goes onto the page. So we get all blog posts, we send that off, it comes back, we're going to get this nice array that looks like this back out. And once we have that array, we can go ahead and use it to construct one of these elements for every single blog post in that array, and load that straight onto the page. There's probably some errors in here, but let's give it a crack and see what happens. Now, the server's already running, and because we're doing client-side code, we don't actually need to bother with reloading the server. So that's all good. Localhost 3000, load it on up. All right, let's try adding a blog post first. I'm going to open up my developer tools to help me with this, because inevitably something's going to go wrong and I want to know what I've messed up. In which case, I've already messed something up. What have we got? Line 49. All right, here's 49 just here. HTTP set request header. I think I'm going a little mad. Let's see. That's not useful at all. Guys, I can't see what's wrong with this. Have I not ended a string properly at some point? You know what, there's probably something hiding in here. Let's take a quick look. Oh, That's not nice. Hang on. This is the danger of copying things from the internet. Okay. Right, so there was some hidden characters floating in there. Let's try that again. That would have been a little bit tricky to find. Loads okay. Now I clicked add blog post and nothing happened, probably because guys, we never finished linking it to the page. All right, so add post needs to get called when the button gets pressed. So on click equals add post. And this one here is going to be get posts. Or get all posts, was it? Just get posts. I really should be more consistent with my naming. That's okay, let's try this again. All right. We click the button. Oh, it's waiting. Hey, there we go. All right, click it twice. That worked. Okay, so that got posted to the server. Let's take a quick look on our server. Hey, there's the 200 for the add post. Now if you click on show blog post, we should retrieve the blog post. Let's see what happens. I click up, bposts.forEach. That's not a function. Interesting. Dot response text. Okay, we'll see what bpost actually is at this point in time. That could be useful to know. Let's refresh that. Click on show when it finishes refreshing. I'm just going to close a couple tabs because this is running really poorly right now. Let's try ditching that. Seriously, what is this that's running? Oh, hey, it printed something out. Okay. Interesting. Did I use the wrong JSON function? I might have used the wrong JSON. Guys, what am I doing? I'm using stringify when I'm meant to pass something. There we go. Let's try that. Okay. Hey, that's better. All right. Didn't quite have my styling right there. Blog post, span. All right, so that gets spans inside blog post. That's a little bit better. Let's quickly try that again. Hey, there we go. All right. So we got there. Let's just take a quick... Sorry, I lost you for a moment there. Where were we? Okay, all right, so that's that all done and working. Yeah, thoughts, questions, general feelings about the vibe. Sort of powered through that fairly quickly. So yeah, how are people feeling? What are people thinking? Do we want to continue with view, or do we want to talk about anything else? Has been a bit over an hour, so I'm thinking might be about time to wrap things up, but we can do a little quick demo with, yeah, you know what, let's do a little quick demo with view if people are feeling that. So can you talk more about sign up? It's mentioned by someone. Can we go through search? Okay. I'm having to the database to show results search for okay, right, okay, so we want to search using, okay, alright, that's fair. How do I redirect to another web page after a user logs in? Okay, oh wow, so lots of questions coming in now. Okay. Okay, so if we have multiple posts, how can we use the search bar to filter through them? So I guess it depends on how we want to go about actually implementing the search, but let's go ahead and add a search onto this page to see what we've got. So I'm going to add an input here. And we're going to modify our get request to accept a search parameter. So we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so how are we going to go about modifying our get request to include a search parameter? We're going to do that. And we're just going to give the search parameter a name. I'm going to call it Q because Q is a nice name to use for a search query. Equals plus, so we append it onto the URL like so, and I believe there's a function for URL encoding. URL encode. And it's this function just here. So this will take the content of the text box and make it all nice for our URL. So that plus URI encoded components, and it's going to be similar to this document.get element by ID, and it was blog post search, wasn't it? So now, if we go ahead and do that, we've got a basic search set up and running. I'm just going to hop back over here. I'm going to reload my page. Whoop. And I'm going to type in something like this. I'm going to go to my networks tab so you can see what's actually getting sent. In fact, I'm going to put some spaces in here and that sort of thing. Now if I click on show blog post, you can see, cool, that's got sent over to my server. So, and that's actually what it gets encoded to when it comes over to the server. Now our middleware will take care of that for us, but let's take a look on the server side. So let's change our get all post to actually deal with the query if it's present. So okay. I'm going to have two versions. I'm going to have the one where a query is set. Now, actually, no, we'll just have, yeah, no, we'll have two different versions. So if Q in REQ req.query. Else. Okay, so this was our previous one that we had. So this will be the, that's going to be the default if the query parameter is not set, but if the queue is set in our URL. And again, I suppose you could have like a default value of queue if you wanted to, instead of having two separate queries. Going to have two separate queries in this case. So select post ID, blah, 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 blah. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a where clause into this one. So where, and the way that we're going to go about doing this is we're going to use the like. So we're going to use, we're going to be searching title and content. So let's go with title. Like, and it's going to be %% and a question mark in the middle, like that. Ooh, just had an error. That's no fun. Let's just take a quick look over there to see if that's still working. All right, so we've got our like in there. Yep, that seems okay. All right, or as I mentioned in the optimization section, this isn't super efficient, but it's a thing that can happen. Okay, so, or content, like, same deal. And then, or what we would have here, we're going to bring back our prepared statements. So it's going to be req.query.queue, and it's the same thing in both places, req.query.queue, like that. Yeah, so that's how we would do a quick search. Let's take a look and restart our server to get that going. Okay, so now if that's always going to contain something, but if I go ahead and we'll start with just hello, like so. Interesting. Q equals, no, it's giving me back 402s. What am I doing here? All right, bear with me for a moment, people. Just got to figure out what I'm missing here. Connection.query, so req.query.queue. Let's just try that real quickly. I'm just going to change this around a little bit. Let's try that again. So what I'm doing is I'm changing it so that it'll send back something a little bit more useful when we go ahead and send that. So we get our 402, but let's see what the 402 actually contains. Response headers, response. Here we go, parse error. You have an error in your SQL syntax, check the manual. Use right. Okay, so because the question mark actually escapes that as well, just gonna have to check this. That seems needlessly complicated. Let's just go ahead and do that, and we'll see if we can make the wildcards appear at the start and end of the strings manually this way. Seems a little over the top though. Okay, that seems to have worked. Okay, so the wildcard characters we can put into our query parameters like that, and that seems to be okay. Okay, so there you go. That's how you do that with prepared statements. In fact, if I just Google that real quickly, statements like wildcard. Okay. Yeah, there you go. All right, so that is the right way to do it, evidently. Is to put it in there. Okay, so we both learned something today. Does that make sense? Anyone got questions or thoughts about that? So that worked with hello, but as you can see, we had different blog posts here. So if I were to put in, say, a question mark symbol, go ahead and find a question mark symbol. Where is it? So, okay, it pulls up blog post number 3. If I do something like post, it doesn't pull up hello. It pulls all the ones with post in it. So that's how we get a search in there. Yeah. Okay. So hopefully that answers those ones. Let's we'll come back to the sign up stuff in a little bit, maybe, but we are getting on 10. Frankie wants to know, how do we redirect to another web page after a user logs in? That's a great question. So it depends how you're implementing your login, but if you're implementing your login using Ajax, then one of the methods that we've been looking at is like you'll get a 200 back if the login was successful, or you'll get a 403 back if it failed, or if you try and use a function of the website that requires a sign-in without a sign-in, then it gives you back a 403. And the question is, okay, so what do you do if you get back a 403? Let's just say, for instance, we wanted to redirect in our code just here. So, so maybe instead of staying on the same page after you've posted a blog post, we redirect to some other page after you post a blog post successfully. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to something redirect. The way that we do that is with the window location. So if I look up window .location. All right, so JavaScript window location. You've got a few different options here. So you can do window.location and just change the entire URL. So if we take a look at some demos of this real quickly. Okay, so all right, so if I go ahead and say window.location equals HTTP Let's put that in a string, shall we? HTTP google.com, like so. That's going to redirect us from the page that we're currently on to google.com when it runs. So if I click on that, ideally it would, it really doesn't want to. Of course it doesn't, okay. Oh, okay, it got blocked. Let's try. Okay, let's try this on an actual page somewhere. So if I create another web page, lol, thanks Amber. All right, so if I go ahead and create another page, let's just call it redirect.html, and we're going to open that one up, and I'm just going to throw the script straight in there, like so. All right, so when that script runs, theoretically it takes us to google.com. So in fact, I probably don't even need to open this in my server, but we could open it in the server if we want to. So localhost 3000 / redirect.html, and takes us to Google straight away. Now if we wanted to stay within the same site, we could do something like .path, and we could change it to just / like that, which will keep us in the same, it's going to keep us on the same website and just modify the path. So this allows us to navigate pages within our website even when it changes domains. So if we go back to that one, post 3000 / redirect.html, and did I make that work properly? Evidently we're failing at redirecting the path, people. Let's take a quick look at our page. So in the console there. Maybe you have to try. Maybe the / isn't necessary. Let's just try that, shall we? Path is blank. We're failing at paths, people. Location host name. Oh, it's path name. It's path name, of course. There we go. It was a whole other thing. Path name. Of course, the reason why that didn't throw a result is because window.location is an object, so we're just creating a new thing, a new parameter on that object called path in that case. Let's try path name. It says path name is including the / this time. Okay, let's try this. All right, nth time lucky. There we go. All right, so it redirected me straight back to the path page. So you can use that in your JSON. You can say, all right, you can use that in your Ajax. So if you get a 403 back, you could go ahead and straight away do a window.location.pathname is /login, or whatever your login page is going to be. In regards to this, how can we redirect to home page with the user's information like welcome user, blah, 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 look at your booking here? Ooh, that's a good question. So ideally you want to keep a bunch of that information. So a lot of this works a lot better. So is the code for this session going to be made available somewhere? Yeah, eventually the code for all of our live streams is going to be made available somewhere. I usually like to tidy it up a little bit first, but then I just run out of time to tidy it up a little bit. So we could go ahead and make it available straight after this, and I could probably pull out week 10's code as well and make that one available too. So we'll see. Yeah, why not? I'll just zip it straight up. It's going to be horrendous and lack comments, but I might get a chance later on to update it. So yeah, yeah, nice. So going back to the question just before, how can we redirect to the homepage with the user's information? And I guess the answer to that is not so easily. So this is going to be more useful for us if this is going to be more useful for us if we have the entire site sort of condensed. If we've got a one-page site, so where the login screen is just something that pops up or that takes up some space on the page and disappears when it's not needed and replaces the content on the page when it is needed. And that way you don't actually have to redirect from one page to another, and the information that you do have stays within that page. For the other bits and pieces, you've got a few options. You could, if you do have to redirect, you could go ahead and you could potentially store some of that information in a cookie, maybe, if it's a small piece of information and if it's not important. Or you could redirect on a successful login, redirect the page on a successful login to your main page, and then you'd have to send a new AJAX request once you reach that main page to pull down the user's information. So redirect to like the user homepage or something on a successful login, and then when the user homepage loads, you could use an AJAX request to pull in that additional information. Or if you wanted, you could make the user's homepage like a dynamic web page or something where it's just rendered directly into the HTML on the server side. Lots of different options as to how you go about doing it, yeah. Does that sort of answer your question, Sachin? Or did I go through that too fast? Probably a little bit too fast. All right, I think that's probably going to be about it for the evening. It's just gone on 10 o'clock, so it's probably late enough for everybody, or at least I have a web sub to release for you all for Prac 9 and one for Prac 10, and also a few other bits and pieces. So I'm going to hop back on those and get those sorted for you all. With regards to sign up, because I know Shamil was asking about sign up there. It really doesn't have to be a whole lot different than what you've got here, just for creating a blog post. So when we're looking at sign up, obviously you're going to have, yeah, I'll zip up the code and put it on my uni. So when you're looking at sign up, obviously you're going to have your usual fields. So you're going to have the field for the username, or creating a new username, field for creating a password, a field for confirming that password. Ideally on your client side, you have a bit of JavaScript that when someone clicks on the submit button, before it actually sends the AJAX request off, you check to see that the passwords match up. That's all. That's nice to do. And if they do, that's all well and good. If they don't, you stop the request and you prompt the user to correct the passwords. Once you've got that all happening, you can add in all the additional information like name, email address, contact information, any other bits and pieces that you want the user to supply. Package it all up into a post request and send it on over to the server pretty much something just like this, except instead of containing a blog post and the title of the blog post, your request is gonna have the information of a user in it, and you would insert that information instead of inserting it into our blog post table. You could go ahead and insert it in a very similar manner straight into a users table, and once it's in the users table, then you've got once it's in the users table, you've got plenty of you've got the new user added in there. Again, you just want to make sure that you're doing things on the server side, like hashing the passwords when they're getting added in, and any additional security stuff that you want to do. Maybe you want to link it to a Google account at the time that they sign up, so you might prompt them to do their Google sign-in as well, or something like that. Got lots of different options there. So we can certainly talk about this more over the next few days. So maybe post a question on my uni. Yeah, exactly. Yes, you can use this same process to get the user registration details into the SQL table. Yes, so you'll have a user table, and you can go ahead and add the user data into it in the exact same way that we're doing here, adding a blog post into a blog post table. Yeah. All right, I'm going to leave it at that for the evening. Thanks everyone for joining us. Lots of good questions there. Hopefully that answered a few of them and cleared a few things up. Have a post on the discussion board if you have questions about things, and hopefully myself or even one of you all will be able to hop on there and answer it and clear a few things up. I'll try to keep an eye on it over the next few days, as I usually do. Yeah, have a great evening. No worries. Glad it was useful.